Hello, welcome to my podcast. Now, this is a conversation with lots of people I really admire. It's a chat about success, health, and happiness, and I know you're going to enjoy it. So, without further delay, let's get started now. Hello, and welcome to a little chat with Dr. Terry Holloway, where I speak to interesting people about life, health, success, and their journey of entrepreneurship. So today I have with me today my friend Ash Gangotra. He's a very interesting man. In fact, every time I meet somebody who's met you, Ash, they tell me, oh my gosh, I've just spoken to Ash and he's got such a story and he's such an interesting person. So that's why I wanted to bring you here today, just to speak to our viewers about your fascinating journey of entrepreneurship. We're going to talk a little bit about culture today and just have a very interesting conversation. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Terry, for having me.
Okay, let's do it. So Ash, first of all, let's tell everyone a little bit about who you are, your background, just a little bit.
So my name is Ash Gangotra. I'm born and raised in Nottingham. My grandparents came to Nottingham in the 50s, and I've basically had a life growing up within a family background of textiles.
Fantastic. So textiles. So I've heard that you have had a bit of a fashion history. So for people who might be lay people or people who are not familiar with fashion, talk a little bit about what a background in textiles really is.
Well, basically, as a menswear designer, fashion designer, I spent 35 years not only studying fashion and textiles, lecturing it, designing, and having my own business. At the age of 19, I set up my own business designing street fashion clubwear, and I was selling it all around the world, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. So Ash, how does someone actually get into the fashion industry? Because I mean, it's a talent that everybody would love to have, you know, personally, professionally. But how do you start a career in fashion? How did you get the fashion bug?
Yeah, I think it came by default because I actually grew up in a factory. So with my family coming from a background in fashion and textiles, as a young boy who was going to school, you know, my parents weren't there to pick me up or drop me off because they were too busy working. So we used to walk back to the factory, and the factory actually became a playground for us. So at a very early age, I'd probably say about 5 or 6, we was picking scraps of fabrics off the floor and playing with them with scissors. So like conventional children might be using card to cut out shapes, we were using fabric to cut out shapes. And later on, as we got a little bit older, we was learning how to use sewing machines. So I think by default, all the creativity stemmed from spending so much time in the family business. And it was eventually something that I knew like the back of my hand, and that's what I ended up going into.
Wow. So you picked it up as a hobby, just as a young child, because it was something to get your hands into, something interesting. And you began to develop a passion for it as you went along?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I'd like to see myself as quite an individualistic type of guy. I have my own sense of style and my own personality, my character. So I was never one of these children who, you know, followed suit. You know, you have leaders or followers, you know, I'm more of a leader. So I did things in my own way. And I guess fashion was something like that, where you can be creative and you can express yourself. And that's what I love about fashion.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about when it transitioned from a hobby into something that became a career for you, Ash, years later.
Yeah, so growing up as a boy, one of my hobbies actually was I was into airplanes. So I joined a junior jet club, which gave us a magazine, and we used to read about Bertie the plane flying all around the world. And I had a passion just in my mind to work with airplanes. So I decided that I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, just like some people want to be firemen. So I had an apprenticeship lined up with Rolls-Royce in Derby, and what happened in my studies, I actually failed some of the exams, which didn't allow me to carry on into the apprenticeship. But what I was good at, which was evident, was all my creative side, art, technical drawing, and writing, and all these creative things. And I thought, well, what do I know best? it's fashion and textiles. It's been in my bloodline since I've been born. So I thought, let me step it up a gear and go up one from what my parents did. And that's when I decided to go into fashion, and I studied fashion. And how it really came about in terms of setting up my business was I didn't get a chance to go on to university because nobody thought I was good enough when I left college. So by default, I ended up having to start my own business because I wasn't given the chances to study further on.
Interesting, Ash. And, you know, I think that is a point that a lot of people can kind of resonate with, that message of, I wasn't good enough, you know, receiving that rejection over and over again, and just never giving up, you know, until you find your niche. So what would you say about a young man as yourself just coming up, trying to pursue fashion, but receiving a lot of no's from the people that you were approaching? How did that impact you?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite difficult because at an early age, I think I was around about 18 when I left college and tried to apply for university. You know, 3 out of 3 universities, I sat there at a panel with 3 people assessing me, and then to say, sorry, you know, you haven't got a place at uni. And it was because in their eyes, through their own criteria, I wasn't good enough. And I guess at the time, you don't know what's what. You know, I was still a young guy. I don't know what the process was, why I didn't get in. All I knew was I didn't get in. I wasn't good enough.
Right.
Now looking back at it, thinking I was the best in my year. I had the best collection. I had the highest marks. I grew up in that industry. I knew some of it more than my own lecturers did. So what criteria did they actually have to say I wasn't good enough? Now, when you know how good you are yourself, you're not going to take it that someone else can just come along and say you're not good enough. So it was within my own character and personality to prove them wrong, to say, I know how good I am. I'm going to prove it. And that's what I eventually did.
Amazing.
Going into business and starting off on my own.
Right. So that rejection almost gave you a bit of an internal defiance where you said, you know what, I'm going to prove them wrong. I know I'm good.
Of course. Who was anybody else to say you're not good enough? Who are these people?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Ash, a lot of these sort of barriers that we bump into along the way. Now that you look back, what do you kind of attribute some of those no's to? Why do you think you did have such a difficult time trying to break through?
I think, you know, in those days, you know, 35 years back, it was very difficult, and it was different in terms of diversity, inclusion. You know, I was probably one of the first, you know, person of color to study fashion and textiles in my college back in 1987. So it was quite some time ago. And I guess, you know, there's a lot of dynamics where most of the students were girls. So then, you know, and most of the lecturers, in fact, all the lecturers were women. So when you've got a guy come on board, it sort of throws a curveball, not, you know, in the way that the teachers have to teach you, how the girls respond to you or work with you in the same class. So, you know, that's why I never did women's wear. Well, people always ask me, why don't you do women's wear? And I said, even in those days, it was very difficult. If we had to make a toile, you know, girls didn't want to be touched, even if we was doing a,
Right.
So that physical contact, which is there, allow us to even do that. So, yeah, there were difficult times.
Wow. It's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about diversity, because I almost feel like race is an issue wherein unless you kind of grow up with that barrier or, you know, just with that obstacle in some situations, obviously it's a beautiful thing that we get to be diverse and of these amazing, gorgeous cultures, and we come into the world confident, excited about who we are, but it's not always received that way.
No, I think one most important thing to realize is when you have communities, sense of communities, even like ourselves growing up, you know, I was born and raised in St. Anne's for a couple of years, and then we moved to the outskirts of Forest Fields. Now, in those days, the community was quite broad. You know, there was a lot of people of color, Indians, Pakistanis, Jewish, English people. There's a whole mix. Even our school, it was very mixed. So I guess we grew up in this bubble where we were all born. There was full integration. You know, everybody knew each other's cultures, you know, whether we was talking patois or somebody was dropping some Punjabi verbs, whatever it was, you know, everybody knew what we were about. It was until we started to grow old and venture out, and then we realized we was entering to these communities where there were predominantly one culture or one race, where you did feel that prejudices, racism. And I guess now we are a lot older and we're traveling the world and we're traveling out of town, out of cities, out of countries. We see a lot more.
Right. So it's really interesting for me to talk to you because obviously we're both brown, right? But we've come from different backgrounds. I'm from an American background, African American descent, and you have a rich Indian culture. What can we tell the world about what minorities sort of experience, I guess, even coming from different parts of the world? And what can we say to other minorities who are actually trying to succeed and maybe facing some of the same obstacles that you might have faced?
I think it's quite a tricky one to sort of explain now, being a person of color and, you know, having our family backgrounds come from Africa or India or whatever country it is. I think what it boils down to is all about education. Yeah. If people haven't got an insight to other people's cultures, the type of food that they eat, the languages that they talk, the cultural values, and a whole heap of things, how will they ever know to integrate? And now the common denominator here is that we live in England, we're British and we speak English. But how many people actually visit our kitchens to see what type of food we cook? Or what is our topic of conversation in our living room on a Saturday afternoon? What films are we watching? So these are a lot of elements that a lot of people don't have access to because we only know people at a surface level. Oh, hi Terry, hi Ash, how you doing? You're black, I'm brown, I'm Indian, or of African descent, whatever. But a lot of people don't actually dig deeper or see anything further to know, what are you really about?
Yeah, what are you really about?
So, you know, we're these books where people just see the front cover.
Yeah.
You know? They don't actually ever get a chance to read the first page, the middle of the book, or the ending. So when you say, you know, you're quite interesting, sometimes I see myself as a bit of a book.
Yeah.
You see the cover.
Yeah.
But they don't actually ever get a chance to read it. And I suppose this is like you unveiling some of my pages today.
Fantastic. Well, I've met loads of amazing people since I've moved here, you know, about maybe 15 years ago. And I found this to be a very warm culture where people have embraced me, people have been kind to me. You know, obviously there are all types of people here, just like anywhere, but I've met some wonderful people here. And many of them might have really good intentions and they want to increase things like diversity, inclusion. They want to cross those barriers, but they might not understand exactly how to do it or what those first steps might be. Do you have any insight into that?
I think, again, it just goes back to understanding the cultures, the communities, and the mindsets. You know, there's so many dynamics involved. And in order to break those barriers, people have really got to spend some time sort of scratching away and understanding these things. Just to give you a quick example, 35 years ago, when I was exporting to Japan, we had to have some business cards produced. And we had to get each business cards from each of the companies who were doing a trade mission over to Japan to have our business cards vetted. And at the time we thought, well, that's my logo, that's my company name. And the reason we had to have this done was the Japanese guys there had to make sure that our business cards didn't cause any offense in terms of what our logos represented or what our names represented. So for example, you know, it's like me trying to promote Peppa Pig in Pakistan, knowing that, you know, it's offensive because they don't eat pork. So these are the type of things that certain people and certain companies do take an understanding to not trying to cause offense and dig a bit deeper. So in order for a lot of us to understand each other, we really have to go into detail to see what are they about and how, you know, we interact with other cultures and communities in the way we speak, what our values are, a whole heap of things we could just go on.
yeah, we've got to get into each other's worlds, don't we? You know, I mean, sometimes or most of the time it finishes, you know, in the office, you shake hands and go home at night. But it takes a bit more than that to understand the depth of a person and who they are. Um, but Ash, your kind of career has taken you far and wide. So I'm quite interested in the fact that I think a little birdie told me you've actually met the royal family. How did that happen?
Well, that was a bit of a funny one. So again, going back to my early days when I was at college and studying fashion and not getting into university, well, the only way I could move myself forward was to set up my own business. So, you know, my parents had some money, but they weren't going to feed me with a silver spoon. So they said, son, you got to sort yourself out. So basically, I ended up going to the Prince's Trust at the time. Well, actually, it was the Prince's Youth Business Trust, which was called 35 years back, and applied for a small loan. And that's how I actually started my business off. And a few years later, I was just lucky enough that I was invited to put on a display of my designs in Nottingham for Prince Charles at the time to come and have a look, which was brilliant. And by the biggest surprise of my life, a year later, which was 1993, I was invited to Highgrove House to have dinner with Prince Charles and some other guests. And that's where I met my first member of the royal family.
Ash, take us inside. Tell us, what was it like in there?
Well, yeah, it's pretty amazing, to be honest. And I don't think I was nervous that much, because out of the 12 people who were sitting for dinner, I was the only one who had met Prince Charles a year before. So he did remember me, and we had a bit of a joke. So yeah, very grand, very lavish. And I think it will spook a few people if they're not used to this society or the way of living. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. Yeah.
Wow. And were they kind to you?
They were very kind. Yeah, it was very kind. Again, just going backwards, I was the only person of color, but not looking at it in a negative way. I felt even more special that I was somebody different. But they were very kind, and the butlers come in with a full tray of whiskeys, gins lined up, and I took a few sips and I enjoyed myself.
Amazing. I just see such a confidence in you, Ash, and I just love that regardless of what you've been through and just encompassing your full journey, you've just come through just so strong, so cultured. And I just think, you know, everything has kind of worked out well for you in your career going forward, it seems.
Well, it seems like that. I mean, you know, a lot of the time people can have a perception of what the person looks like from the outside. And just as we spoke, unless you start delving in, you don't necessarily see the scars. So although my journey has been fascinating and I've done a lot of things, and most of the things have absolutely been great, there have been areas and times in my life where it's been so low. And that is because of the nature of working for yourself and being in business. I remember at a very young age, you know, my parents lived at home, you know, with myself, and they actually worked for me. And there was companies who weren't paying my bills. And in the end, I had to shut my business down and lay my parents off. And it was very, very hard at that time. So yeah, you do have difficult times, and they always exist in business, but you just have to be resilient and crack on.
Wow. Ash, I would love to give a few tips to those who are out there. I had an amazing opportunity, I would say a few weeks ago, to speak to some minorities who are, you know, coming up at the university, and they're looking at us for, you know, tips, answers, clues about how they can break into society with confidence, with perseverance, and whether or not there's a place for them as they move forward and try to succeed. So which tips might you give to someone out there who's looking at you to say, Ash, I would love to kind of walk the path that you've walked. Can you tell me what I need to do going forward?
I think, again, it's my interpretation of the answer that I'm going to give you. And regardless of your color, your race, or your background, my father always used to say to me, if you're going to do something, do it well. And it's a funny thing that when you do something well, all these parameters disappear. Nobody looks at you as black. Nobody looks at you as a minority. Nobody looks at you in any other way. And to give you a clear example, if you look at the World Cup in football or the UEFA, and you see a lot of players who are people of color, they're fantastic players. And when they're scoring goals and they're bringing a country to victory, The color has nothing to do with it. Why? Is because it's based on their performance and what they can do. So for any individual going out there and wanting to do something for themselves, right, do it well.
Do it well.
Do it well. Do it properly. And you'll get all the respect you need. All these little things will just filter away. I think, when people do pick up, they're just picking at you for little wrong things. And you will get people who are going to slate you for something. Could be out of jealousy or whatever, but in the end, just get on with your lives, do it well.
Do it well. Well, if I could leave everyone with a tip today, I would say do it well. I'm very, very pleased to speak to you, Ash. I mean, I could talk to you all day, honestly, but I think that's a great message that you sent out, that regardless of our obstacles, where we come from, and where we've been, if we really pursue our passion with excellence, with sincerity and authenticity, we will arrive at our destination.
You definitely will. I mean, going back, my grandfather came to Nottingham in the 1950s into a place where he didn't know the language, the culture, but he took that step to have a belief in that this country was going to make him give him a bright future, and that's what he succeeded in.
Fantastic. That's life, and we've got so much of our amazing life to live. Thank you so much, Ash. It's wonderful speaking to you today. See you soon. Do it well.